Thank you so much, Senator Padilla, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to meet you on this ASP Chat.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. First time, hopefully first time of many being with you.
We hope so.
That's right.
So today we're going to be focusing on immigration reform and the current situation at the southern border. You have called what's going on a developing crisis. So can you start by first describing the situation a little bit, and specifically as it relates to the influx of child migrants arriving over the last few months?
Right. Well, I haven't quite called it a crisis yet. I know that in and of itself is part of the conversation. Is it a problem? Is it a challenge? Is it a crisis? I'll tell you, more than anything, it's get the latest evidence of the failures of the prior administration, right? People, families, even unaccompanied minors showing up at our borders, both on the northern side and the southern side, is nothing new in the history of the United States of America. We do have a legal process for people seeking asylum, right? Refugees fleeing, whether it's violence or turmoil or whatever it is back home, seeking refuge in the United States. That's a process. But what's been defunded is our capacity to address those issues. When people present themselves, we've got to know who they are, what circumstances they're fleeing from, what their case is in wanting to come here. And so it's something that we see, frankly, every spring. It's a seasonal dynamic. Some years there's a little bit of an uptick. Some years there's a lot of bit of an uptick. And that's what we're experiencing right now for a variety of reasons. The work is there for the Biden administration to not just reverse some of the cruel policies we hate from the Trump administration, but to put the capacity back in. Not just for Border Patrol, mind you, and not just for ICE, but for entities like the Department of Health and Human Services. While we're seeking to address the situation at the border at the present time, what I'm hoping for is that it doesn't serve as too much of a distraction of the more comprehensive immigration policies that need to be updated in the United States of America. Right, separate and apart from the kids at the border right now, there's more than 11 million people, undocumented immigrants that have been living in the United States, working in the United States, paying taxes in the United States, half of them working in what we consider essential jobs that we've come to appreciate during the course of this pandemic. They've earned security and an opportunity to work towards citizenship. And, this, again, just a reminder of how outdated our immigration policies have been and the need to update them and reform them.
Now, the influx of unaccompanied children has challenged the government's ability to house them. How can this problem be solved safely?
That's a great question. And I think one of the things I've been reminded of late, now that I'm in this position, is sort of what happens. Right? Think of a flow chart when unaccompanied minors present themselves at the border. They are taken into custody by Border Patrol, and by law, they're within 72 hours to be processed and handed over to the Department of Health and Human Services. So those first 72 hours, you probably have seen the images of the kind of conditions that sometimes they are detained in. Unacceptable, unconscionable. No kid should necessarily be in that kind of experience, sleeping on the floor, chain link fencing, that sort of thing. The Department of Health and Human Services is a social welfare agency, not a detention facility. They're not the Department of Corrections. So I made it a point to head down to San Diego recently myself. The San Diego Convention Center is being converted into one of these midterm, because we don't want it to be long-term stays for these unaccompanied minors. But given the numbers of the uptick this year and the capacity that has shrunk under the prior administration, it's a little bit of a logistical crunch that the federal government is responding to right now. So how can we make it better? We can make it better by investing more, not just in facilities, but in the personnel that is required to evaluate these kids, check on their background, consider these cases. There's a legal due process that they're all entitled to. And frankly, the work it takes to connect them with extended family or other sponsors that are in the United States, that they should be handed over to while their asylum claims are working its way through the courts. So it's more than anything a resource issue that'll improve, the conditions that they're in temporarily, keeping the time of detention to a minimum, and a more timely resolution of their individual cases.
That's really interesting. So just to be clear then, so what you're saying is once the kids come to the United States, that the images that we've seen recently, that waiting period is a 72-hour period that they're in these situations, and then something else happens after that?
Yeah, well, by law, it's supposed to be no more than 72 hours. But what's happened is, the Department of Health and Human Services doesn't have the facilities or the resources to deal with this huge influx. And so the kids end up being in an ICE facility, for example, longer than the 72 hours that is the federal policy. So by restoring the resources and capacity, not just on the ICE end or the Border Patrol end, but on the Health and Human Services end, we can move the kids more humanely through the process while their asylum cases are being considered.
And then where do they go right after that 72-hour period?
Initially, again, they're in the hands of either the Border Patrol or in a few cases ICE. Within 72 hours, ideally, they're transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services in much better conditions. And even then, we want that to be as short of a stay as possible because it's ideal to connect those children with, maybe an extended family member or a parent they're trying to catch up with or a friend of the family. Or there's actually a federal version of foster care, families that are willing to take these kids in while their asylum cases are being processed. So that's ultimately the objective, but some important steps before we can hand them over that way, including background checks for the people that these minors are being handed over to. We want to make sure that the uncle or the aunt or the friend of the family that they say they are, that's indeed the case. And we don't want to be in a hurry and mistakenly put these kids in a pretty bad situation. We all know human trafficking, child labor, exploitation, that kind of stuff that happens far too often around the world. We want to be working to prevent that and keep children from that, not to facilitate their exploitation.
How can the government best address family reunification with regards to past separation policies at the border?
A lot of it is, once again, a resource question. Number one, how quickly can we have these individual cases processed and children being reunited with their families? Frankly, I think the separation of children from their families, a lot of it can be avoided. Under the Obama administration, people seek asylum in the United States were able to apply from their home countries, from their hometowns, without having to migrate, travel a thousands-mile journey, dangerous journey to the border to seek asylum. That option was undone by the Trump administration, and the Biden administration is working feverishly to reinstate that. So that's one. From a bigger picture, longer-term issue, it's why are people seeking to leave their home countries, their hometowns, to come to the United States to begin with? Is it for lack of economic opportunity? Is it for violent circumstances that they may be living in, fear of their lives? Is it for a very slow recovery to natural disasters, hurricanes or otherwise? If the United States can be a partner, as we have throughout the course of our history, with other countries to further develop and create economic opportunity there, that's going to relieve the draw, if you will, the people feeling like they have no other opportunity where they are, and that their only hope is to come to the United States. But that obviously is a bigger picture, longer term challenge for us.
Last week, you attended a bipartisan meeting of senators to discuss the border. What, if any, progress was made out of that meeting? Are there any solutions or immediate solutions that you feel came up that are possible to actually put in place?
Yeah, look, I'm cautiously optimistic. The biggest takeaway from that first bipartisan meeting was a commitment to be genuine and sincere to try to find an agreement. Obviously, if it was easy, it'd be done already. Immigration and immigration reform tends to be pretty touchy for a lot of people and has been for many, many years. But seeing Democrats and Republicans in a room, laying our cards on the table and committing to try to find a path forward gives me some optimism that we'll be able to make this happen. But now comes the nitty-gritty work of specifically what do we or don't we like about what the White House, for example, has offered. We know that there's bipartisan support already for protecting dreamers and offering them a pathway to citizenship. We know there's bipartisan support for better treatment of farm workers, for example. a lot of different types of essential workers, but farm workers, I think most people can visibly understand how critical they are for our nation's food supply, for our economy, how tough of a job that is that very few people would be willing to do. So they've earned our support, and that should include a pathway to citizenship. It's the morally right thing to do. That has bipartisan support. I have my own measure that would offer a pathway to citizenship for any undocumented immigrant that has been working as an essential worker during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? For all the tweets and Facebook posts I've seen over the course of the last year praising workers in healthcare, in agriculture, in transportation, in construction, etc., risking their health and their lives to keep the rest of us safe. Risking their health and their lives to keep the supply chain moving. My God, they've earned an opportunity to citizenship, in my opinion. And, that's one of the other measures that we hope make it into this comprehensive package that we'd love to get in front of the president in the months ahead.
You're the first Latino senator elected from California and have long called for immigration reform. What does comprehensive immigration reform mean to you, and is there a path forward for that kind of reform in Congress?
So, look, in my opinion, comprehensive reform is long overdue. The last time there was a significant reform in the United States was in 1986, literally decades. We've been working for well more than a decade with mixed success. There's a comprehensive package that passed the House, but not the Senate, a package that would pass the Senate, but not the House. So nothing quite landing on the desk of any recent president. And for me, comprehensive is just that. There's a lot of support for dreamers, for example. Let's bring these now adults who came to this country as children, brought here by their parents, but have been living here, going to school here, going on to college. They're in the workforce. With constant fear of deportation, they deserve better than that. They are as American as you and I. They just don't have that piece of paper to prove it. And so if we were to do that, that alone doesn't answer all the issues that we need to address. There's people here under what's called temporary protective status, TPS. They've been here for a long time for different situations in their home countries. Talked about farm workers earlier. And there's the need to restore the asylum system at the border. And even for the millions of legal immigrants that are here and eligible to become citizens but haven't begun the naturalization process, for a lot of them, it's the sheer cost of the application is prohibitive. Or you're required to wait, 8, 10 years or longer before going through the process. So when we talk about comprehensive, we mean tackling all of these more than loose ends in one fell swoop, along with smarter security at the border. I think it's time. I think it's doable, and we're hoping to get significant progress this year.
So you've been in office for 2 months now. What is the likelihood of some of those initiatives actually taking place and having some serious immigration reform as you see it?
Yeah, so I've been in the United States Senate for a couple of months now. Time is flying. We're still drinking from the fire hose, ramping up in our position here. But I've been around politics long enough to know this. The closer you get to the next election, the harder it's going to get. People start viewing it less through the what's right for the country and more through the, what is potentially at risk for people that are on the ballot. So I'm hoping we can achieve as much of this as possible, as soon as possible. And, given the bipartisan nature of the discussions thus far, I'm optimistic that, we'll get a good chunk of this done. Maybe not everything, that'd be my ideal world. But if we can get as much of this done as possible, I do think the stars are aligned right now.
It's great to hear. Thank you so much, Senator. We really appreciate it. It's great to meet you. Sometime maybe you can come back on and tell us the difference of which is harder, being in the state legislature or the Senate, or which of your jobs are the best.
I'll tell you right now, man, just the speed, different speed right now, but I think we're keeping it, and we'll be good. We'll find our groove soon enough.
Great. Well, it's great to meet you. Great talking to you. Thank you so much. We'll do this again soon. Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this ASP Chat. Take care, Senator.